welcome to the deep dive,
Oh, yeah.
where we're exploring some seriously intriguing stuff from Alan Watts' book
Okay.
on the taboo, Against Knowing Who You Are.
Mm-hmm.
This book,
Yeah.
it's like the secret knowledge Watts might have slipped to his own kids,
Interesting.
like a hidden perspective on who we really are.
Watts always had a knack for making even the most complex philosophy relatable.
Right.
But this book
Yeah.
tackles a taboo,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what makes it so fascinating.
Exactly. And just to set the stage,
Right?
Watts wasn't your typical armchair philosopher.
Okay.
He held a master's in theology,
Wow.
a doctorate of divinity,
Okay.
and he was known for bridging Eastern thought, like Zen Buddhism and Vedanta,
Mm-hmm.
with Western ideas, which was groundbreaking for his time.
Yeah.
He died back in '74.
Hmm.
But the questions he raised about our sense of self
Yeah.
and our relationship with technology
Right.
feel even more relevant today.
Absolutely. And that's where this taboo idea comes in. Watts argued that we're all participating in this kind of unspoken agreement
Okay.
to ignore our true nature.
Okay.
He suggests this is the real taboo holding us back, not the things we typically think of.
So get ready to have your world flip, because we're diving deep into some mind-bending concepts.
Okay.
Watts argues that this idea we have ourselves as separate eyes,
Yeah.
these little egos inside our bodies, is actually a hallucination.
Hallucination.
He says it's not supported by science or Eastern thought.
Right. And he uses the way we talk as evidence.
Okay.
We say things like, I came into this world, or
Mhm.
face reality, or conquer nature.
Oh.
All of these phrases reinforce the illusion that we are separate, independent entities
Yeah.
existing apart from everything around us.
It's subtle, but you're right, it's everywhere.
It is.
And thinking about it, have you ever felt like just a tiny spark
Mm.
in this vast, indifferent universe?
No, yeah.
I know, I have. Yeah. Watts says that feeling, while common, isn't the whole picture.
Exactly. And he uses this wonderful story,
Okay.
almost like a myth, to illustrate his point.
Okay.
Imagine God playing a giant game of hide and seek,
Mm-hmm.
and to make things interesting, disguising themselves as everything in the universe.
Okay.
To create these wild adventures.
Yeah.
The twist.
Okay.
You are one of those disguises.
Wow. That's a really fun way to think about it.
Yeah.
So instead of being separate,
Mhm.
we're all part of this interconnected, unified self,
Mhm.
experiencing itself in infinite ways.
Exactly. Now, of course, he doesn't mean this literally.
Right.
What's fascinating is that this myth connects to a core idea in Vedanta,
Okay.
a school of thought within Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
Vedanta proposes that God isn't some separate ruler in the clouds,
Right.
but the very self of the world playing the game of existence from within.
Okay. That's pretty profound.
It is.
It makes you rethink the whole idea of God and our place in the universe.
Yeah.
But if we take this idea seriously, how does it change the way we live?
That's a great question, and it's something Watts explores in depth throughout the book.
Okay.
He suggests that this illusion of separateness
Mhm.
leads us to all sorts of problems.
Okay.
From our relationship with technology to our struggles with finding meaning and purpose.
So it's not just some abstract philosophical idea. It actually has real-world implications.
Oh, yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Absolutely. And one of the key ways this illusion plays out
Okay.
is in our obsession with opposites.
Mm-hmm.
Good and bad, life and death, order and chaos.
Yeah.
And our constant attempts to make one side win,
Okay.
which Watts calls the game of black and white.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Okay.
We're conditioned from a young age to make the right choices, strive for success,
Yeah.
and avoid failure at all costs,
Right.
as if life is this constant battle between good and bad.
Exactly. And Watts uses technology
Okay.
as a prime example of this white must win mentality.
Okay.
We're always striving to create order, control every aspect of our lives in the world. Yeah.
And technology is the ultimate tool for doing that.
It makes sense on the surface.
Right.
Who doesn't want a safer, more efficient world?
Yeah.
But are we sacrificing something in this pursuit of control?
That's precisely what Watts argues.
Okay.
He points out that this quest for absolute control can backfire, making life less meaningful,
Okay.
even sterile.
Oh, wow.
Think about safety measures that restrict our freedom, or information overload that leaves us feeling overwhelmed,
Right.
or faster travel that makes everywhere feel the same.
It's almost like we're so busy controlling things that we're controlling all the joy and spontaneity out of life.
Yes. It's a bit ironic, isn't it?
It is.
And that irony leads us to another fascinating, seemingly contradictory idea from Watts.
Okay.
Becoming a genuine fake.
Okay, becoming a genuine fake
Yeah?
sounds like a paradox.
Uh,
How can you be genuine and a fake at the same time? I'm intrigued.
this is where Watts dives into the idea that our sense of individuality.
Our unique personalities are actually heavily shaped by society's expectations.
Good.
From a young age, we internalize these pressures,
Right.
creating a kind of controlling officer in our minds.
It's like this inner critic that's always telling us how to act, how to think, and how to feel.
Exactly. And Watts points out how this can lead to a lot of internal conflict. We're told to be ourselves, to be natural,
Yeah.
but then we're bombarded with all these rules and expectations.
Wow.
It's like being told to relax on demand.
Yeah.
It just backfires.
That's so true.
Yeah.
You can't force yourself to relax, just like you can't force yourself to be genuine
Right.
when you're constantly worried about fitting in.
Right. And Watts provides this great example
Okay.
of the life script that many of us feel pressured to follow.
Okay.
Get good grades, graduate, climb the career ladder, and then retire.
Yeah.
We're constantly striving, reaching for the next milestone.
Mm-hmm.
But when do we actually stop and enjoy the journey?
It's like we're on this treadmill running and running, but never really getting anywhere.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, are we living authentically? Or are we just playing a role that society has written for us?
That's a powerful question.
Yeah.
And Watts encourages us to challenge those expectations
Okay.
and look for genuine experiences and connection beyond those prescribed roles.
Okay.
But to do that, we need a real shift in perspective,
Mm-hmm.
a way of seeing beyond the limitations of our everyday perception.
Which brings us to what might be the most mind-blowing chapter in the book. The world is your body. If this sense of separateness we feel is an illusion, where does the self end and the world begin?
Right.
Watts gets pretty radical here, doesn't he?
He does. He starts by pointing out that our perception of the world is inherently limited.
Oh.
It's like we're looking through a narrow lens, like
Yeah.
that cat peeking through a slit in a fence, only glimpsing fragments of the whole picture.
And it makes sense.
We can't possibly process every single sensory input.
Right.
But I can see how that limited perception reinforces our sense of separateness
Yeah.
and keeps us from seeing the interconnectedness of everything.
Precisely, Watts uses the analogy of a flashlight in a dark room.
Okay.
Our attention is like that beam of light, illuminating only a small portion of what's actually there.
Yeah.
Think about it. You drive your car,
Uh-huh.
you have a conversation,
Yeah?
but can you recall every detail you saw or heard along the way?
No.
Of course not.
We're always filtering and focusing,
Right.
which keeps us from being completely overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
But Watts suggests there's a whole lot more going on than what we typically notice.
Exactly. And he says we need to shift our focus from asking, what is it, to asking, what is it doing and in what context?
Okay.
Instead of getting stuck in rigid definitions and categories,
Well-
we need to see the dynamic interplay of everything around us.
It's like switching from a zoomed-in view to a panoramic shot.
Seeing the bigger picture and how everything fits together.
Yeah.
It's a whole new way of experiencing the world.
It is, and this shift in perspective leads us to an even deeper question.
Okay.
If the self isn't limited to our bodies and everything's interconnected,
Right.
what is this underlying reality that connects it all?
This is where things get really metaphysical. Right? I'm ready to have my mind blown wide open.
Well, hold on tight, because this is where Watts introduces the idea
Oh,
of a metaphysical IT,
okay.
a term he uses to describe the ground of being the source of all existence.
Okay.
It's a difficult concept to grasp
Yeah.
because it goes beyond our usual categories of thought.
So it's not about some mystical spirit realm or anything like that?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Watts actually draws on physics to explain this idea,
Okay.
showing how things like light, sound,
Mm-hmm.
even matter itself,
Yeah.
don't exist in isolation.
Okay.
They only become things through interaction. It's like that old question.
Okay.
If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
I remember that thought experiment from philosophy class.
Uh-huh.
It's a classic.
And Watts would say that the sound, the tree, the forest, it's all part of a unified process.
Okay.
Our senses translate that process into something we can experience.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean those things exist independently of us.
So you're saying our perception plays an active role in shaping reality?
Precisely. Watts even goes so far as to suggest that the universe, as we know it, is an ongoing interaction with our brains.
Okay.
It's not that reality is entirely subjective, but our participation is a key element in creating it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm definitely feeling my perspective shifting here.
Yeah.
It's like we're not just passive observers of the universe,
Right.
but active participants in its creation.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And this insight has some pretty profound implications for how we live our lives. Watts argues that many of our problems stem from this relentless pursuit of goals.
Oh, okay.
Always striving for some future payoff,
Right.
without ever finding contentment in the present moment.
Which is kind of how our society is structured, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're always looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
The promotion, the vacation, the bigger house.
Right.
It's like this endless cycle of wanting and striving.
Exactly. And Watts uses the example of the Christmas buildup and the inevitable letdown afterward
Oh, yeah.
to illustrate this point.
Right.
We pour so much energy into seeking fulfillment in things that never quite deliver.
It's like we're chasing after some external source of happiness, but true fulfillment is found somewhere else entirely.
Right. And Watts argues that real joy comes from finding delight in the doing in the present moment, rather than always seeking a future reward. That's where true skill, creativity, and artistry come from.
So it's not about giving up on goals altogether, but about finding a balance between striving and savoring the process itself.
Exactly. And this brings us to the crucial question. If everything we've discussed is true, if the separate self is an illusion, and we're all part of this interconnected IT, how does that actually change the way we live? What do we do with this mind-blowing information?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
We've been on this wild ride through Watts' ideas.
It has been quite a journey.
Mind thoroughly blown.
Yeah.
But how do we apply this to our daily lives?
That's something Watts grapples with, too. He doesn't offer, like, a step-by-step guide or claim to have all the answers. But he points us toward a deeper understanding of how we play the game of life.
So it's not about reaching some kind of ultimate enlightenment overnight, but about seeing the world through a new lens.
Exactly. He encourages us to recognize the interconnectedness of everything, to see the humor in the human condition, and even find compassion for those we consider our enemies.
Wow, that's a big ask.
It is.
Especially these days when it feels like everyone is divided into opposing camps.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder if demonizing the other side is actually preventing us from solving some of the world's biggest problems.
That's a great point. Issues like social justice, environmentalism, the pursuit of peace. These are complex challenges that can't be resolved by clinging to this illusion of separation.
So how do we move forward? If we let go of this idea of a separate self, where do we find our place in the world?
Watts suggests that qualities like compassion, humor, and even chivalry can help us navigate the world in a new way. When we see the interconnectedness of everything, we can find our place in the dance of existence instead of feeling like isolated, struggling egos.
That's such a beautiful way to put it.
It is a dance.
It's like we're all part of this grand cosmic dance. And the more we can let go of our rigid sense of self, the more freely we can move. It makes me think about something Watts wrote. Not directly about the ego or the IT, but it really resonated with me. He said, conscious memory plays little part in our biological existence. Thus, as my sensation of I-ness, of being alive, once came into being without conscious memory or intent, so it will arise again and again. I return in every baby born. It makes you question the idea that we're these fixed, unchanging entities.
That's incredibly powerful. It suggests that maybe the I isn't a fixed entity, but a recurring experience, like a wave returning to the ocean only to reappear as a new wave.
So instead of fearing death, we can embrace the idea that this I-ness might arise again and again in new forms. That's both comforting and awe-inspiring. And on that note, I think we'll leave you to ponder that. Does Watts' idea of a recurring I-ness change how you see yourself, others, the world? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep diving deep.